Good morning. Here we are at the end of the week, and this is an exciting week because tonight we're starting our missions conference with our guest missionaries, and what a great weekend we're going to have. I'm so thankful for how God's blessed us and preserved us. Here we are, you that have been at our church. We've got our 70 days of prayer and fasting, and if you've not gotten a copy of that booklet and the bookmarks that are reminders of how to pray as we develop a little bit of an organized prayer life, drawing near to God. James says, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. And so these 70 days of prayer and fasting, we're in each week, we're adding some things to help us draw near to God and to help equip the people of God so they know how to get close to God. And so very important that Christianity is not a mechanical thing. It's not where we go on Sunday morning. It's not what we wear. It's not carrying a Bible. Biblical Christianity is a relationship, and I think where we go on Sunday morning has to do with the relationship. But going to church doesn't make us have a relationship. It's the relationship that gets us to do all the things we do. Why do I treat my neighbor right? Because I have a relationship with the Lord, and the Lord loves me, and He asked me to love my neighbors. Therefore, because I have a vertical relationship, my horizontal relationship is different. And the world and religions of the world reverse that. They say, well, I need to treat my neighbor right so that I can have a proper relationship. That's not it. It's everything in our Christian life. Why do I not use drugs and liquor? Well, because I can't love God like I should and love my neighbor like I should if my brain and my body is influenced by or under the control of a godless substance like that. And so because I have the right vertical relationship, I do not do certain things because those things will hinder this that's most important. The world and religions will tell us, well, if you do enough good, then you'll have the right vertical. And that's totally backwards. And even in our circles, in Baptist circles, especially for the young people that grow up in church, they can get thinking it's all about how you act and how you dress and where you go and where you don't go. And they get that all mixed up, and they start thinking that Christianity is all the do's, when Christianity is really, it's Him. It's a relationship with Him. And because of my relationship with Him, there's a lot of things I don't do, places I don't go, things I won't be involved in. And because I love my wife, I have no relationship with any other woman. I'm very guarded in any relationship like that. And it's because of the one relationship that I'm dedicated to. It keeps me from these others. Well, the same with my relationship to the Lord. Because of my closeness to God, I don't want to, and you can fill in the blanks. And I think our outward is not that which gets us near to God. The world's religions, shave my head, put an orange bathrobe on, and somehow I'm humble and close to God. That's as far from reality as it could be. But because I get near to God, I am concerned how I look. I am concerned about how I behave. And the devil just reverses everything. He messes everything up. And so these 70 days in our churches, revival, let it begin in me. And that's the big thing, is in me. And let's draw near to God so that that my relationship to God ripples into every area of life, whether it be how I drive or how I treat my neighbor. What used to be common courtesy, it was all rooted in the golden rule, or the second commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. And this Christian life, the old devil twists it and religion twists it. And our goal at church during these 70 days, we're challenging people, take a day to fast, take a half a day to fast, whatever, and don't just miss food and keep running your crazy schedule, but fast and take extra time those days to seek God and to spend time just quietly going to God and asking for help to know Him better. We're praying and fasting for our country and for our churches across the nation, not for our will. If it was my will, I'd have the right people in office in different political positions, and I'd have laws passed this way and that way, but I don't know what's best for our country. But I know this, I know we need God. And so I want us as a church to draw near to God, and then to get this vertical so close and intimate that that affects everything we do, but also that God, as we Wednesday night I talked about Josiah. Josiah had this humble relationship of seeking after God and longing to please him. So God came down and pardoned the country for the whole lifetime of Josiah. And we saw God's hand in our adult Sunday school as we looked at the life of Hezekiah and Manasseh. And because of these men who humbled themselves and looked to God for help, because of that, God reached out and touched their nation. And that's what we want. If God in mercy would just heal our land and turn us to the right a little bit, and we sure need the Lord. And so I hope you're joining us in this. Take a little extra time with God, and take time in your Bible and pray for our country, for our leaders. And again, the first prayer bookmark I gave you was about praying for our governmental leaders. And then we gave you a couple other things, how to have a 10-minute effective prayer life. And then I talked at Church Wednesday, how to expand that into as much time as you've got, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. You know, the song, Sweet Hour of Prayer, Sweet Hour of Prayer that calls me from a world of care. Not many Christians know what it means to pray for an hour. Yet Jesus and the disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane, he brings the disciples this far. He takes Peter and James and John a little further, and then he goes a little bit further, and he's praying, and he says to them, could you not watch or pray for just 1 hour? 1 hour is not a long time to just go to God seeking his help. And that's what Jesus said to the disciples. Watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And we need to understand time in prayer, it protects us. Time in prayer puts a hedge about us. Time in prayer puts an umbrella of God's mercy and protection on us. And we need to seek after God with all our heart and long for him. And so I hope you'll do that. Now this weekend, with our missions emphasis, tonight, 7 o'clock, we have our missions, the beginning of our missions conference, and I hope you can come. If you can't be there, watch it online, and we'll bring in our missionary flags, and we'll have a good introduction. But I hope you come a little early, get to meet the missionaries, spend a few minutes at the missionary tables, get copies of their prayer cards, and let's get the beginning of this missions conference. Let's get it started out with our hearts seeking for God and his help. Several things in missions conference. Number one, we want to get our heart burdened so that we will pray more for these missionaries. Number two, I just last night talked to Go Oishi on the phone. He's over in Japan, and it's just like he's in the next house next door or something. We're chatting back and forth about adjustments, and the more we get around these missionaries, the more we'll pray for them. Secondly, as we get around these missionaries and watch the videos and hear these testimonies, it should touch our heart that we would give financially. Whether you're at church or watching from home at church or whatever, let me encourage you, give to missions. Give, if you didn't give anything to missions last year, start tithing, be faithful to your church first, but give something to missions every week. It doesn't matter what, $1, $2, and then inch it up. And for these many years we've been giving, and we give more and more each year. And so we'll I just challenged our church Wednesday night to put $1 more in the plate than you did last year every week. Now, for maybe you put nothing in, then you put in $1 a week. It's $52 this year. But you maybe put in $50 a week. Now this year you're going to put in $51 or whatever. Whatever God leads, your work may have changed and you can't give as much, or your work may have changed and you can give in much more, whatever that might be. But let's consider this weekend our missions giving. And dollars add up. When you have a few hundred people doing it, suddenly a couple of $100 a week. Now we've got $800 to $1,000 a month additional giving. That's a huge, huge amount to these missionaries as we support missionaries all around the world, and then church planting here at home. So I hope you'll come be a part of the missions conference. And then the third thing, so one is affecting our prayer life, two, affecting our financial life. And the third thing, praying that God would call some of our members to go across the world. And like I said, I was just talking to Go and Danielle, just been a few weeks in Japan. Johnny and Brittany Beal have been almost a year in Thailand. Nate and Tara Beal there. I think in the next few weeks they'll be headed down to Peru. I think it's Peru. I get Peru and Chile mixed up, but I'm pretty sure it's, and now I'm not sure what it is. But these young people, what a great thing. And so pray. That's the third purpose of the missions conference, that God would reach into the hearts of our young people, especially our older people can go to the mission field. Tim Shook, who oversees the great ministry in Thailand, that's where John and Brittany Beal are. Tim Shook's parents also went to Thailand, and they're way up in years. They went there for many years, and out of retirement from their work here in the States, they packed up, went to Thailand, and I'm thinking they spent 10 years or so there, and they're in their 70s now and home and not in good health. But they took their retirement years and put them into the mission field in Thailand. So pray that God would remind us to pray more for missionaries, to pray that He would touch our hearts financially, that we might give, and then thirdly, that God would call some people to the mission field. Great needs. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians in just a minute or two, but I want to show you a book. I know I have some big books, and when I was a kid, 1 Corinthians 15, when I was a young person, big books intimidated me. Hardy Boy books intimidated me. But now I love books, and I've learned that I can read and that they're not scary. And in the last couple of days, I've been talking about reading, especially you that have children. And biographies are so very powerful. Now, one of my teachers in Bible college, Ed Reese, just a very, very smart man, organized man, and he took biographies of people. He specialized in biographies. He taught a class, Biographies of Great Men. But he taught us all these lessons, but he also taught us how to gather information and use that information. Well, this is a book he put out, and it's an Encyclopedia of Christian Biographies. And it's by Ed Reese, the Encyclopedia of Christian Biographies. He also did the Reese Chronological Bible. And he put the Bible in chronological order. If you're going to get one of those, get the second edition. He changed just a couple of things that he said he felt made it a little bit more accurate to the timetables. but this, talking about biographies, if the thing that makes this great is you can see on this page, see how short they are. It's just a paragraph or two. And so you could take this book and say every day you're going to read about one person to your kids. And a lot of them, this is not all maybe born again people, but it's Christian biographies, people who call themselves Christians. You know, that's a pretty big spectrum. But there are people, so many different people here. Here's Marcus Whitman. I just flipped over to him, a martyred Presbyterian missionary and physician. Well, if I'm not mistaken, it was Whitman who was the one who founded, or the college was named after him, where I first went to go to college in Walla Walla, Washington. He died in Oregon, but I'm pretty sure his ministry was there in that area of southeastern Washington. And just various people, and some you've heard of and some you've not. But this, you could pick a biography and just one paragraph, and you could read it to your kids, especially, or to yourself, and you think, I'd like to read some more about him. Then you could go online and find a book and look them up. This is a great, if you just want to keep it, you want to look up who people are, who's who in Christendom, which is not always, obviously not always, our brand of Christianity, but there's great people here. And so if you ever wanted to, Ulrich Zwingli in here, Zwingli murdered a bunch of Baptists, but he was a religious leader. And so anyway, this is the book. And again, talking about good books to have for your family, good books to introduce to your children. And something like this would be a help to family devotions or preparation for getting books for your children. You might read about somebody and think, oh, no, that's a guy I want. Like many of us have heard of Jim Elliot, who went down to work with the Auca Indians, who was martyred. But you get reading in here and you find out that there was his wife who went back. There was the other family that went along with him. I'm blank on their name right now, but the other family that went, the husband was killed, but the sister stayed, and there's a dad who had 3 kids involved in that whole thing, and that's a pretty touching story of the Auca Indians and how deeply it influenced people's families, and so you can learn a lot going through these stories. But to me, biographies are very powerful. And if you have children especially, but even for us adults, it'd be so very helpful that we would learn from great people. And there's just a host of great people that we can learn from. I want to take us over to 1 Corinthians 15 and take a few minutes this morning and talk about what yesterday I talked a little bit about, just a little bit about us being Baptists and who we are, why we are, what we are. And but what is it, the thing that sets us apart? What is the great thing that God's called us to do? And I've said the things that make us unusual would be S's. Separation. We believe in separation from the world. Our standards, that we believe in a holy life, that we believe in the scriptures, that we have a word for word perfect Bible in our hands, not some lost manuscript that no one's ever seen. And then soul winning, that we go out soul winning. And so standards and separation, and then the scriptures and soul winning, those are things that are vitally important to the script, to Bible Christianity. And if we don't have Bible Christianity, then we've got a man invented Christianity. So, but I want you to look with me at 1 Corinthians 15. The Apostle Paul says, "Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel, which I preached unto you, which also ye have received, and wherein ye stand." Now, so he says, here's the gospel. And I'm about to explain to you what the gospel is. So in verse 2, "For I delivered to you first of all that which I also received, how that Christ died for our sins according to the scripture." Number one part of the gospel, Christ died. Verse 4, "that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the scriptures." Now that's the gospel, that he died, that he was buried, and that he rose again. That Christ died for us is not anything spectacular unless he rose again. But he was buried and spent 3 days in a grave to confirm the fact that he was dead. That according to Ephesians 4, now that he ascended, about verse 9 of Ephesians 4, now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first in the lower parts of the earth and led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. So he's on the cross, he's buried, and he's the 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the earth, like Jonah was in the belly of the whale. And so he goes down to a place called paradise, and he leads captivity captive, all those people that were down there on credit. They couldn't go to heaven yet. They were believers, but the blood had not been shed yet. And so he sheds his blood for their sins. He leads captivity captive and takes them away. And before he comes again, he's already gone down, delivered them, and given them the okay, now you're free to get into heaven because I've paid your admission. And they were all on layaway before that. The final payment hadn't been made. But the gospel is that he died, that he was buried, that he rose again. That's the gospel. Now, with that in mind, if you go over to Matthew 28, very, very familiar, especially with Missions Month here. But in Matthew 28, in the last few verses of the chapter, he says in verse 19, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations." This is the Great Commission. We're to go and we're to go to all nations. That's our commission. That's the command of God. And he's not commanded us to make money and build estates and build up big inheritances for our kids and grandkids or whatever. The great work of God is to go to the world with this precious book and to bring them the gospel. What's the gospel? That Christ died, that he was buried, and that he rose again, and that you can too. So he says there in verse 17, or verse 18, "And Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, All power is given unto me in heaven and earth. Go ye therefore." Well, what's the therefore? Because all power is given to Jesus, because he's the authority, because he's the boss. All power, in the middle of verse 18, all power is given to me, Jesus said, in heaven and on earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing. So we're to go, we're to teach them, get them the gospel, and then we're to baptize them. And again, we want to start talking about churches and what we're like. Well, we need to be baptizing believers. We need to be getting people saved, and we need to be baptizing those new converts. That is the New Testament church. Now, if you're working with the Eskimos in the Arctic, you're not going to baptize as many as if you're in the Philippines. But there ought to be people who hear the gospel. We ought to be going, we ought to be telling, and then when people get saved, we ought to be baptizing them. And then he goes on the next verse, he says, teaching them, in verse 20, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And so he says, once you get them, you go, and then you get them saved, and then you baptize them, and then your job is to teach them all the stuff I taught you. And then he closes it with this in verse 20, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And so that goes with verse 18, where he says, all power is given to me. He said, I'm the boss. All the authority is in me. There go ye therefore, and preach and baptize and teach, and I'll go with you. I'm with you. I'm going to be with you always. I'm the authority. I'm the power. And sometimes we get worried about things, and I do. I shouldn't. I wish I had that perfect faith that never struggled. But health problems come, battles come in life, and of course the devil sows tares among the wheat. Every church has got false believers in it. There are people that come and of course we have double agents. We know enough in our world to get people in these other countries that are representing us secretly, and they act like they fit in, but they're really working for our government, and other governments do that here. It's just, of course the devil would do that. And so this person, Judas managed to spend 3 years with Jesus, and he wasn't saved. He had no part, no belief, no faith. And so, of course, people would creep in. But our job is to realize it's not about these crummy people and people who do wrong. Our job as the church is to do what he said. I'm the authority. Because I'm the boss, I want you to go. I want you to go. I want you to win them. I want you to baptize them. I want you to teach them. And I'll be with you. Because there are going to be trials. There are going to be difficulties. And the great work of God is that we would continue to do what Jesus did. See, Jesus left his home. He left a comfortable home. He left a blessed home. He left a place of prosperity and comfort, and he came to a stinking, dirty, vulgar world that took advantage of him and mocked him and murdered him. And that's a missionary. And over the course of the centuries, many of people have packed up from home and gone across the world, gone from civilization to uncivilized, gone from love to hatred, gone from sanitary to unsanitary. For a long time, missionaries, they would pack their belongings in a coffin, go to where they're going, and they bring their own coffin because they knew somebody's going to die. And many places didn't have coffins. They just buried people underground or put them out into a river or whatever, or burned them. And so they bring their own coffin. And they assumed they were going to die. It was just assumed. The wife or the husband were going to die. The children were going to be buried, dead, die and be buried. And Jesus did that. He was a missionary. And he left a beautiful place for an ugly place. And that's what our missionary movement is all about. And we need missionaries. We need to support them financially, but we need the human power. And I hope you'll pray and take time that you would pray that God would call people. There are more missionaries for a long time now, like 30, 40 years. There have been more missionaries leaving the field than have been going back. People coming home because of health, people coming home because their family was not doing well, their marriage not doing well, people coming home because they just got old, and they're not being replaced one for one. And so the number of people out in the world preaching the gospel is getting lower and lower, while the world's population is getting larger and larger. And we need to get the gospel to the world. And we need to get out and tell people. So I hope you'll pray. You see that teen choir singing on Wednesday night, pray. You come into church on a Sunday and you see all these teenagers around our church. Pray for our young people. You see that group of kids. I was just looking at a picture last night. We had, here I'm in our dining room area of our house downstairs, but right here in this room, I'm guessing we had 35 or so college students here at Christmas, and had a Christmas party and some fun and meals. And I look at 35 young people, all college age, and think, that some of them would pack up and go to the mission field and go and live for God somewhere around the world and take the gospel. What's the gospel? 1 Corinthians 15, that he died, that he was buried, that he rose again. That's the gospel. That's the definition of the gospel. And what is the Great Commission? That because he's the authority, we would go and teach or preach, that we would win people, that we'd baptize them, and then we'd teach them, and that God would be with us, whatever we face, whatever hardship. And we have a great, great opportunity before us. Paul said a great and open, a great effectual door, an open door is before me, but there are many adversaries. Don't think it's strange. First Peter says, concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, we're going to have adversaries. Paul said, I've got this great door open to me. Boy, there are adversaries, people causing me grief all over. And he didn't even have social media to have people use against him. But we've got a great God. And I hope you'll pray this weekend for our missions conference, for our young people, pray for our adults, and pray that God would bless our financial giving, and that God would allow us to do more in 2021 than we did in 2020. And boy, it was great in 2020. We met all of our missionary commitments. We were able to send extra money to several people. We were able to pick up some other missionaries that needed on our Wednesday night offerings. We picked up some extra missionaries, and wow, what a great 2020 we had. But I'm praying for a better 2021, and I hope you are too. Have a great day, and 7 o'clock tonight, tomorrow, 9:30 in the morning, we're setting up for our missions conference dinner. Then we'll have our soul winning meeting. We'll get out with our Bible clubs around the community tomorrow. We're starting a new Bible club tomorrow in another area. And then 3 o'clock, we have our international supper. And it's an afternoon, an early dinner, a late lunch. And then we'll hear from our missionaries tomorrow night. And Sunday, a full day. I hope you'll come. I hope you'll join us. And if you're joining us from home through the internet, pray that God would bless and that God would work on hearts. And how we need him. So I hope you'll take time to pray and ask God's blessing on your country and on your church and on churches. A lot of wonderful churches around the nation. Pray that God would bless them and strengthen them. And let's have a great weekend together.